Welcome back. Most schools have moved beyond COVID restrictions and remote learning, but the effects are still being felt by students and their education. The Department of Education releasing test scores that show math scores for 9-year-olds dropped for the first time in the history of standardized testing, and reading scores also saw their largest drop in more than 30 years, a learning loss that experts warn will take years to recover from.
So let's bring back our panelists, Matt Keelan, Jessie Jane Duff, and Jack Brewer. Jack, I'll start with you. First of all, the NFL opens up next week. I'm sure you're excited about that, having been a former player. But as a dad, your reaction to this, I think, not so shocking report. I mean, if you have common sense, you saw this was going to happen.
Exactly. I think, COVID has just put a spotlight on the real issues that we have in our public school educational system. I run a youth program here in Broward County. I have about 60 kids, and I could have told you this years ago. That our reading and math proficiency levels in this nation right now really mirror third world countries. And I think these issues, yes, they have gotten worse because of COVID. But when you mix in the horrific mentality of CRT, where you're actually telling these poor black kids that they can't learn, and you're telling these kids that if they make D's or F's, it's okay, and you're moving them on. And then you couple that with this leftist mentality that's going on in our system, our educational system, that's not keeping these kids accountable. We have a real problem on our hand, and we're going to feel the blunt of this because this generation is going to be very difficult to overcome so much decline when it comes to reading and math.
Right. The pandemic just completely highlighting it, especially when you've got remote learning, right? You've got students who you can tell are just falling behind. Jessie Jane, the fact, though, that it's these core subjects where you've got students falling behind, doesn't this give you an exact roadmap of where teacher priorities really should be when it comes to getting kids back on track?
Teachers' priorities have fallen behind for some time. It wasn't just COVID that brought this out. It's actually exemplified the current problem that we've had. Janet Napolitano had said when she was leaving as the Secretary of Homeland Security way back during the Barack Obama days, that the greatest threat to our national security was the fact that we wouldn't have enough U.S. born or U.S. citizen engineers, I should say. They don't have to be born here, but they must be U.S. citizens to get clearances. Why is that? Because our math scores have deteriorated dramatically. You can determine often if children are going to go to college by 4th grade. So let alone that many of these high school seniors who graduated and gone on to college, many of the people I'm speaking to that are educators have said that they see a dramatic shift with the incoming freshmen and their capability to really keep up, because many of them were moved on and passed on just to graduate because the teachers themselves were unable to teach remotely. And this was enabled by the teachers' unions who fought so aggressively to keep the children out of the schools. So shame on the Democratic policies that created this mess and only enhanced what we already had as a current problem.
Matt, if the Republicans are going to win, they got to win back the suburbs, right? Abortion's a big issue, pulling women towards the Democrats. But a way to get women back, maybe to the GOP column, would be education, right? They had to go through all this nonsense with the COVID lockdowns. This is an idea that Republicans should be, really pushing, and I think it's a winner. What about you?
Rob, all you have to do is look at the Virginia governor's race. And in my old home state of Virginia, Loudoun County, and what happened in Loudoun County with the teachers and the administrators and the parents in our own Department of Homeland Security calling those parents domestic terrorists for wanting to know what the heck was going on in their schools. Look, not just in suburbia, but in poor communities where they were hit the hardest. This is an issue that drives people away from the Democratic Party. And unfortunately for the Democrats, they're beholden to people like AFT. I wonder if these test scores came up when the AFT's president has met with President Biden numerous times. I bet you it has not been a topic, but it needs to be. Our priorities need to be our children. I want to thank Jack for the great work that he does in his community. And it's heroes like him that are taking back our education and allowing our kids to hopefully prosper. That's what we all want.
Yeah, the parents, they definitely had their voices heard when they came out in that Virginia governor's race. But Jack, even tying back to what we heard from the president last night when he was really calling out a section of the voting population, the MAGA Republicans, what he looked like on that stage last night with the red lighting behind him and the 2 Marines behind him. Is that a unifying message as we take a look at this image?
It looks satanic. I mean, look at it. I mean, I hate to do that, but it is a spiritual warfare that we're facing with this president who would speak like that to so many Americans who give their life for this country. You have Americans that are servants, like myself. I consider myself a MAGA supporter. And so as a MAGA supporter, you're talking to me, President Biden. And President Biden, I've been serving this nation a long time, the real underserved people, not promoting victimhood, not trying to divide us by skin color like many of your policies do, but I do it with my hands. And so for a man like that to come out and speak the way that he did, that's offensive to me. And I don't like it very much. And as Americans, I just hope and pray that we can really get behind our local leaders that are men and women of God back again in this nation, because this man is doing things that are just sickening, and we all feel it to the core of our souls.
Jessie Jane, what stood out to you from last night?
So he's going to try to say we must defeat them because we hate them. That was his message. That is not any message for any political party, let alone American, to run on. I served this country 20 years as a United States Marine, and this is the first time a commander-in-chief has spoken to me that way and said that I was a threat to this nation, because I am a MAGA supporter. I'm sorry, I was a co-chair for Veterans for Trump, and everything I saw coming from the previous administration was productivity for this nation and moving forward. But this, as Jack called it, a demonic demonstration with the red behind him. And to utilize having the United States Marines behind him was that subtle message of a military threat, that we have the power to crush you. You now are going to intimidate so many people from even wanting to put a bumper sticker on their car, because for them to feel threatened, as I would if I went into the grocery store, that think that somebody could think I'm a fascist, a racist, a Nazi, every other name in the book that they have, because they have no message. He could not talk about the current climate that he has created. He had to attack because he has nothing else for his party.
Yeah, and the campaign season really now just heating up ahead of the midterms. Our thanks to our panelists, Matt Keelan, Jessie Jane Duff, and Jack Brewer. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday.